So if you've gotten an email or more than one email that says that Stewarding the Tension or the human side has been live this morning, and the first one was just me standing around waiting on Substack to connect. I apologize for that. When I logged out of Substack and came back, there were two people watching, and that I was live, just standing around drinking my coffee. So I apologize for that. But listen, I wanted to take some time. I'm probably going to do this most Saturdays, if not, if not at other times during the week. I'm going to try to get into a regular rhythm of going live, and I'm going to post it here on Substack. I'll go live here on Substack, and I'll also probably go live over on like Facebook or some of the other platforms. I just finished recording episode 2 for the Tension Lab podcast. So if you're on Facebook and YouTube, probably YouTube, not on Facebook. If you go over to YouTube and you look for our channel, it's the Tension Lab. You can start to see some of the content that's being put together there for the podcast. So in the podcast, I'm going to spend probably 4 or 5 episodes just on chapter 1 because there's so much meat and potatoes that's going on inside chapter 1 that we could be talking about it for quite some time. The premise of the book and Stewarding the Tension, that's the working subtitle that's going on right now, or the tagline, is that we're letting go of something without giving something up. And I know that sounds countercultural. Is that how can you let go of something without giving something up, right? And countercultural might be the wrong word there. It sounds contradictory. It sounds contradictory. How can I let go of something if I'm not giving something up? And so chapter 1 kind of unpacks this whole idea of identity fusion as we attach it to the roles, the work that we get to do. Maybe at least I'll just speak to myself instead of speaking for, other people. But for myself, when I was in the military for 25 years, my identity was that. If somebody said, "Who is Rudy?" my answer would have been, I'm a Navy guy. I'm a chief in the Navy, or I'm an officer in the Navy, or I'm a leader in the Navy. And so, which is what I did for work, but it wasn't necessarily who I am. So what happens is that from the time we're really young into college, or if we don't go into college and we go off into the workforce, we we start achieving. We start setting goals for ourselves. We start reaching the plateau of, whether it's a financial plateau, we want to make a certain amount of money, or we want to get into we want to move up the corporate ladder into management or something like that. And then when we achieve, we feel like we've arrived and we've gotten there. And then we continue to perform in that. The tension happens is that when there's a shift in the role, let's say you've made a plan to exit and you're leaving one role for another, that you still have this connection. You still have this connection to this identity that you have created for yourself within the previous role. And so you have these achievements that go into your resume. These are your success measures. But then inside, maybe you're feeling like something's off. Like you're still producing, you're still leading, you're still effective in your role, but things just feel different. Maybe they feel heavier than they used to, or just there's something going on internally. And so you might come to the conclusion like, man, I'm just broken. Maybe I need to go to the gym more. Maybe I need to change my diet. Maybe I need to go on more hikes. Maybe I need to add more than self-satisfying behaviors or tasks within the rhythms of my week so I can be sustainable in my work role. But maybe you can't name, or you don't have language for, or vocabulary for that internal thing that's taking place inside you. And so that's what we're after in chapter 1 of Stewarding the Tension. We're after, one, first normalizing that, hey, these feelings are normal aboard. I'm digging into some research and getting statistics on imposter syndrome, burnout indicators. I'm posting those on LinkedIn. So if you're following me or we're connected on LinkedIn, you'll see more and more of that content because I'm interested in this discussion on how my performance on paper covered for the imposter syndrome I was experiencing internally, but I didn't know I was experiencing imposter syndrome internally. And then when I shifted in the role, there was a grief and an underlying sadness that I was no longer connected to that previous role, right? So our core fear, which is what grief and sadness and feelings seek to mask, if you will, or cover or soothe or protect, the core fear is being invisible. The core fear is being just that failure dynamic that I did not perform well in that role, and therefore now that I'm not in that role, I'm forgotten. That's the core fear. The core fear is the work of my hands has no impact, has no value, it has no meaning. Therefore, I need to amass these things on paper to reflect my my meaning and my impact because that is who I am versus what I do. You see how the layers of that just continue to just stack on top of themselves. We expected clarity maybe in our new role as we transition from one to another, but what we experienced was grief, and maybe we didn't expect that. That was surprising. That was surprising. Some of us will say, "You know what? I need to go after this next role. It's much more simple, much more clear. It's much more in alignment with my gifts and my skill sets." And when we get there, maybe there's a grief that takes place that was surprising. And so we begin to ask the deeper questions then when we're talking about grief and sadness. Once we've identified it, is what exactly is it that's being grieved? And so in chapter one, this is what we're doing. We're one normalizing that everybody lives in and under this tension and that we get to steward it. We get to handle it well. That's what stewarding means. We get to handle it well and in healthy ways. We get to identify with language. We get to place a vocabulary to what's with our feelings so that way we can have sustainability. We can move forward in identity, achievement, role, and purpose, right? From a healthier position as we're stewarding this tension, right? So depending on what it is you do, you may have asked yourself the question, who am I? And I want you to ask yourself that question now if you've never posed it to yourself. Is who am I versus what do you do? So what actually happens in the transition is that we have these disruptions that take place. The first disruption is in your identity disruption. When I left the military, when I left corporate America, when I left business ownership, when I left full-time ministry, right? We have this identity disruption. Who am I without this role? And we also have a relationship disruption, which is why are people treating me differently, right? Some of the previous lives, we've talked about that, out of uniform, people treat us differently, and we're just regular people now, and that feels weird, that feels odd, that feels different. So we have this relationship disruption, and then we have purpose disruption. What am I supposed to do now? Like, what am I supposed to do now if I don't have a full calendar or schedule? I don't have meetings to be at. If you're retired, you might find yourself asking these questions. Who am I without this role? Why are people treating me differently? What am I gonna do now? And there's an emotional stability disruption with that internal sadness and that grief. Like, why am I reacting like this? And most leaders interpret these disruptions as personal failures, but it's not. It's not. And this is the core truth that we find in chapter one of Stewarding the Tension that deals with this. You're not broken. These are not core failures. And I want you to understand that if you're in a season where these disruptions are taking place and you're feeling disoriented or confused, or it's emotionally heavier than what you've experienced previously, I want you to hear this clearly. You're not broken. What you're experiencing is normal human response to role and identity disruption. And so this is how chapter 1 unfolds in how to stewarding the tension. This is how we're learning to steward the tension. When we're recognizing it for what it is, we're giving it language, we're normalizing this discussion. I'm going to be on LinkedIn asking people to be courageous and vulnerable with how they feel about some of these disruptive type moments. Because here's what happens, right? Like we mentioned before, there's a core fear that our achievement is looking to cover. And so when I ask people to be vulnerable with sharing their core fear on a public professional platform like LinkedIn, I'm interested to see who will engage. I'm not worried about who will not engage, but I'm just interested to see if people will be comfortable in being vulnerable and answering that question, like, what are you scared of? What's your core fear? And what does your professional life do with respect to masking that core fear or covering that core fear or soothing that core fear or regulating that core fear? And then what will you do when that professional life comes to an end, or at least that role comes to an end? This is the journey that we're on. This is a journey. So, if you stuck around for the whole, 12 minutes of this live, thank you. The recordings will be up. You'll see little bits and pieces of this on reels and story sort of thing. But just know I want to hear from you. One, I want you to know that you're not broken. Two, I want to hear about your core fear, and if you're vulnerable enough and bold enough and courageous enough to be able to share that. So God bless you, and I'll check in with you on the next one.